is a country in South Asia. It is the second most populous country, the seventh largest country by land area, and the most populous democracy in the world. Bounded by the Indian Ocean on the south, the Arabian Sea on the southwest, and the Bay of Bengal on the southeast, it shares land borders with Pakistan to the west, China, Nepal, and Bhutan to the north, and Bangladesh and Myanmar to the east. In the Indian Ocean, India is in the vicinity of Sri Lanka and the Maldives. Its Andaman and Nicobar Islands share a maritime border with Thailand, Myanmar and Indonesia. Modern humans arrived on the Indian subcontinent from Africa no later than 55,000 years ago. 24. Their long occupation. Initially in varying forms of isolation as hunter-gatherers, has made the region highly diverse. Second only to Africa in human genetic diversity. 25. Settled life emerged on the subcontinent in the western margins of the Indus River basin 9,000 years ago, evolving gradually into the Indus Valley civilization of the 3rd millennium BCE. 26. By 1200 BCE, an archaic form, an Indo-European language, had diffused into India from the northwest. 27. Unfolding as the language of the Rigveda, and recording the dawning of Hinduism in India. 28. Disputed. Discuss. The Dravidian languages of India were supplanted in the northern and western regions. 29. By 400 BCE. Stratification and exclusion by caste had emerged within Hinduism. 30. And Buddhism and Jainism had arisen, proclaiming social orders unlinked to heredity. 31. Early political consolidations gave rise to the loose-knit Maurya and Gupta empires based in the Ganges basin. 32. Their collective era was suffused with wide-ranging creativity. 33. But also marked by the declining status of women. 34. And the incorporation of untouchability into an organized system of belief. 35. In South India, the Middle Kingdoms exported Dravidian languages, scripts and religious cultures to the kingdoms of Southeast Asia. 36. In the early medieval era, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Zoroastrianism put down roots on India's southern and western coasts. 37. Muslim armies from Central Asia intermittently overran India's northern plains. 38. Eventually establishing the Delhi Sultanate, and drawing northern India into the cosmopolitan networks of medieval Islam. 39. In the 15th century, the Vijayanagara Empire created a long-lasting composite Hindu culture in South India. 40. In the Punjab, Sikhism emerged, rejecting institutionalized religion. 41. The Mughal Empire, in 1526, ushered in 2 centuries of relative peace. 42. Leaving a legacy of luminous architecture. 43. Gradually expanding rule of the British East India Company followed, turning India into a colonial economy, but also consolidating its sovereignty. 44. British Crown rule began in 1858. The rights promised to Indians were granted slowly. 45. But technological changes were introduced, and ideas of education, modernity and the public life took root. 46. A pioneering and influential nationalist movement emerged, which was noted for non-violent resistance and became the major factor in ending British rule. 47. In 1947 the British Indian Empire was partitioned into 2 independent dominions, a Hindu-majority Dominion of India and a Muslim-majority Dominion of Pakistan, amid large-scale loss of life and an unprecedented migration. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, 3rd edition 2009, the name, India, is derived from the classical Latin India, a reference to South Asia and an uncertain region to its east. and in turn derived successively from Hellenistic Greek India, India Ancient Greek Indos, Indos Old Persian Hindush, an eastern province of the Achaemenid Empire, and ultimately its cognate. The Sanskrit Sindhu, or river, specifically the Indus River and, by implication, its well-settled southern basin. 61-62, the ancient Greeks referred to the Indians as Indoi, Indi, which translates as the people of the Indus. 63, the term Bharat, pronounced bat, listen, mentioned in both Indian epic poetry and the Constitution of India. 64-65, is used in its variations by many Indian languages. A modern rendering of the historical name Bharatavarsha, which applied originally to a region of the Gangetic Valley. 66-67, Bharat gained increased currency from the mid-19th century as a native name for India. 64-68, Hindustan, and Stan, listen, is a Middle Persian name for India, introduced during the Mughal Empire and used widely since. Its meaning has varied, referring to a region encompassing present-day northern India and Pakistan or to India in its near entirety. 64-68-69, history. By 55,000 years ago, the first modern humans, or Homo sapiens, had arrived on the Indian subcontinent from Africa, where they had earlier evolved. 72, 73, 74, the earliest known modern human remains in South Asia date to about 30,000 years ago. 75, after 6500 BCE. Evidence for domestication of food crops and animals, construction of permanent structures, and storage of agricultural surplus appeared in Mehrgarh and other sites in what is now Balochistan. Pakistan. 76, these gradually developed into the Indus Valley Civilization. 77, 76, the first urban culture in South Asia. 78, which flourished during 2500–1900 BCE in what is now Pakistan and Western India. 79, centered around cities such as Mohenjo-Daro, Harappa, Dholavira, and Kalibangan, and relying on varied forms of subsistence, the civilization engaged robustly in crafts production and wide-ranging trade. 78, during the period 2000 to 500 BCE. Many regions of the subcontinent transitioned from the Chalcolithic cultures to the Iron Age ones. 80, the Vedas. The oldest scriptures associated with Hinduism, 81, were composed during this period. 82, and historians have analyzed these to posit a Vedic culture in the Punjab region and the Upper Gangetic Plain. 80, most historians also consider this period to have encompassed several waves of Indo-Aryan migration into the subcontinent from the northwest. 81, the caste system, which created a hierarchy of priests, warriors, and free peasants, but which excluded indigenous peoples by labeling their occupations impure, arose during this period. 83, on the Deccan Plateau. Archaeological evidence from this period suggests the existence of a chiefdom stage of political organization. 80, in South India. A progression to sedentary life is indicated by the large number of megalithic monuments dating from this period. 84, as well as by nearby traces of agriculture, irrigation tanks, and craft traditions. 84, clockwise from upper left. A map of Ashoka's empire, c. 250 BCE. B. The map of India, c. 350 CE. C. Cave 26 of the Rock-Cut Ajanta caves. 5th century CE. In the late Vedic period, around the 6th century BCE, the small states and chiefdoms of the Ganges Plain and the northwestern regions had consolidated into 16 major oligarchies and religious movements, two of which became independent religions. Jainism came into prominence during the life of its exemplar, Mahavira. 87. Buddhism, based on the teachings of Gautama Buddha, attracted followers from all social classes excepting the middle class. Chronicling the life of the Buddha was central to the beginnings of recorded history in India. 88, 89, 90, in an age of increasing urban wealth. Both religions held up renunciation as an ideal. 91, and both established long-lasting monastic traditions. Politically, by the 3rd century BCE, the Kingdom of Magadha had annexed or reduced other states to emerge as the Mauryan Empire. 92. The empire was once thought to have controlled most of the subcontinent except the far south. But its core regions are now thought to have been separated by large autonomous areas. 93. 94. The Mauryan kings are known as much for their empire building and determined management of public life as for Ashoka's renunciation of militarism and far-flung advocacy of the Buddhist Dharma. The Sangam literature of the Tamil language reveals that, between 200 BCE and 200 CE, the southern peninsula was ruled by the Cheras, the Cholas, and the Pandyas. Dynasties that traded extensively with the Roman Empire and with West and Southeast Asia. 97, 98, in North India, Hinduism asserted patriarchal control within the family, leading to increased subordination of women. 99, 92, by the 4th and 5th centuries, the Gupta Empire had created a complex system of administration and taxation in the Greater Ganges Plain. This system became a model for later Indian kingdoms. 100, 101, under the Guptas, a renewed Hinduism based on devotion, rather than the management of ritual, began to assert itself. 102. This renewal was reflected in a flowering of sculpture and architecture, which found patrons among an urban elite. 101. Classical Sanskrit literature flowered as well. And Indian science, astronomy, medicine, and mathematics made significant advances. 101. Medieval India. The Indian early medieval age, 600 CE to 1200 CE, is defined by regional kingdoms and cultural diversity. 103, when Harsha of Kannauj, who ruled much of the Indo-Gangetic plain from 606 to 647 CE, attempted to expand southwards, he was defeated by the Chalukya ruler of the Deccan. 104, when his successor attempted to expand eastwards, he was defeated by the Pala king of Bengal. 104, when the Chalukyas attempted to expand southwards, they were defeated by the Pallavas from farther south, who in turn were opposed by the Pandyas and the Cholas from still farther south. 104, no ruler of this period was able to create an empire and consistently control lands much beyond their core region. 103, during this time, pastoral peoples, whose land had been cleared to make way for the growing agricultural economy, were accommodated within caste society, as were new non-traditional ruling classes. 105, the caste system consequently began to show regional differences. 105, in the 6th and 7th centuries. The first devotional hymns were created in the Tamil language. 106, they were imitated all over India and led to both the resurgence of Hinduism and the development of all modern languages of the subcontinent. 106, Indian royalty, big and small, and the temples they patronized drew citizens in great numbers to the capital cities, which became economic hubs as well. 107, temple towns of various sizes began to appear everywhere as India underwent another urbanization. 107, by the 8th and 9th centuries. The effects were felt in Southeast Asia, as South Indian culture The Indian early medieval age, 600 CE to 1200 CE, is defined by regional kingdoms and cultural diversity. 103, when Harsha of Kannauj, who ruled much of the Indo-Gangetic plain from 606 to 647 CE, attempted to expand southwards, he was defeated by the Chalukya ruler of the Deccan. 104. In the early 16th century, northern India, then under mainly Muslim rulers, 116, fell again to the superior mobility and firepower of a new generation of Central Asian warriors. 117, the resulting Mughal Empire did not stamp out the local societies it came to rule. Instead, it balanced and pacified them through new administrative practices. 118, 119, and diverse and inclusive ruling elites. 120, leading to more systematic, centralized, and uniform rule. 121, eschewing tribal bonds and Islamic identity, especially under Akbar. The Mughals united their far-flung realms through loyalty, expressed through a Persianized culture, to an emperor who had near-divine status. 120, the Mughal state's economic policies, deriving most revenues from agriculture. 122, and mandating that taxes be paid in the well-regulated silver currency. 123, caused peasants and artisans to enter larger markets. 121, the relative peace maintained by the empire during much of the 17th century was a factor in India's economic expansion. 121, resulting in greater patronage of painting, literary forms, textiles, and architecture. 124, newly coherent social groups in northern and western India, such as the Marathas, the Rajputs, and the Sikhs, gained military and governing ambitions during Mughal rule, which, through collaboration or adversity, gave them both recognition and military experience. 125, expanding commerce during Mughal rule gave rise to new Indian commercial and political elites along the coasts of southern and eastern India. 125, as the empire disintegrated, many among these elites were able to seek and control their own affairs. Historians consider India's modern age to have begun sometime between 1848 and 1885. The appointment in 1848 of Lord Dalhousie as Governor-General of the East India Company set the stage for changes essential to a modern state. These included the consolidation and demarcation of sovereignty, the surveillance of the population, and the education of citizens. Technological changes, among them, railways, canals, and the telegraph, were introduced not long after their introduction in Europe. 134, 135, 136, 137. However, disaffection with the company also grew during this time and set off the Indian Rebellion of 1857. Fed by diverse resentments and perceptions, including invasive British-style social reforms, harsh land taxes, and summary treatment of some rich landowners and princes. The rebellion rocked many regions of northern and central India and shook the foundations of company rule. 138, 139. Although the rebellion was suppressed by 1858. It led to the dissolution of the East India Company and the direct administration of India by the British government, proclaiming a unitary state and a gradual but limited British-style parliamentary system. The new rulers also protected princes and landed gentry as a feudal safeguard against future unrest. 140, 141. In the decades following, public life gradually emerged all over India, leading eventually to the founding of the Indian National Congress in 1885. 142, 143, 144, 145. The rush of technology and the commercialization of agriculture in the second half of the 19th century was marked by economic setbacks, and many small farmers became dependent on the whims of faraway markets. 146. There was an increase in the number of large-scale famines. 147, and despite the risks of infrastructure development borne by Indian taxpayers, little industrial employment was generated for Indians. 148. There were also salutary effects. Commercial cropping, especially in the newly canaled Punjab, led to increased food production for internal consumption. 149. The railway network provided critical famine relief. 150. Notably reduced the cost of moving goods. 150. And helped nascent Indian-owned industry. 149. After World War I, in which approximately 1 million Indians served, 151, a new period began. It was marked by British reforms but also repressive legislation, by more strident Indian calls for self-rule, and by the beginnings of a non-violent movement of non-cooperation, of which Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi would become the leader and enduring symbol. 152. During the 1930s, slow legislative reform was enacted by the British. The Indian National Congress won victories in the resulting elections. 153. The next decade was beset with crises: Indian participation in World War II, the Congress's final push for non-cooperation, and an upsurge of Muslim nationalism. All were capped by the advent of independence in 1947, but tempered by the partition of India into two states, India and Pakistan. 154. Vital to India's self-image as an independent nation was its constitution, completed in 1950, which put in place a secular and democratic republic. 155. It has remained a democracy with civil liberties, an active Supreme Court, and a largely independent press. 156. Economic liberalization, which began in the 1990s, has created a large urban middle class, transformed India into one of the world's fastest-growing economies. 157. And increased its geopolitical clout. Indian movies, music, and spiritual teachings play an increasing role in global culture. 156. Yet, India is also shaped by seemingly unyielding poverty, both rural and urban. 156. By religious and caste-related violence. 158. By Maoist-inspired Naxalite insurgencies. 159, and by separatism in Jammu and Kashmir and in northeast India. 160. It has unresolved territorial disputes with China. 161, and with Pakistan. 161. India's sustained democratic freedoms are unique among the world's newer nations. However, in spite of its recent economic successes, freedom from want for its disadvantaged population remains a goal yet to be achieved. 162. India accounts for the bulk of the Indian subcontinent, lying atop the Indian tectonic plate, a part of the Indo-Australian plate. 163. India's defining geological processes began 75 million years ago when the Indian plate, then part of the southern supercontinent Gondwana, began a northeastward drift caused by seafloor spreading to its southwest, and later, south and southeast. 163. Simultaneously, the vast Tethyan oceanic crust, to its northeast, began to subduct under the Eurasian plate. 163. These dual processes, driven by convection in the Earth's mantle, both created the Indian Ocean and caused the Indian continental crust eventually to underthrust Eurasia and to uplift the Himalayas. 163, immediately south of the emerging Himalayas. Plate movement created a vast trough that rapidly filled with river-borne sediment. 164, and now constitutes the Indo-Gangetic Plain. 165, cut off from the plain by the ancient Aravalli Range lies the Thar Desert. The original Indian plate survives as Peninsular India, the oldest and geologically most stable part of India. It extends as far north as the Satpura and Vindhya ranges in central India. These parallel chains run from the Arabian Sea coast in Gujarat in the west to the coal-rich Chota Nagpur Plateau in Jharkhand in the east. 167, to the south, the remaining peninsular landmass. The Deccan Plateau is flanked on the west and east by coastal ranges known as the Western and Eastern Ghats. 168, the plateau contains the country's oldest rock formations, some over 1 billion years old. Constituted in such fashion, India lies to the north of the equator between 6 degrees 44 and 35 degrees 30 north latitude, I, and 68 degrees 7 and 97 degrees 25 east longitude. Major Himalayan origin rivers that substantially flow through India include the Ganges and the Brahmaputra, both of which drain into the Bay of Bengal. 172. Important tributaries of the Ganges include the Yamuna and the Kosi, the latter's extremely low gradient, caused by long-term silt deposition, leads to severe floods and course changes. 173, 174, major peninsular rivers, whose steeper gradients prevent their waters from flooding, include the Godavari, the Mahanadi, the Kaveri, and the Krishna, which also drain into the Bay of Bengal. 175, and the Narmada and the Tapti, which drain into the Arabian Sea. 176, coastal features include the marshy Rann of Kutch of western India and the alluvial Sundarbans Delta of eastern India. The latter is shared with Bangladesh. 177, India has two archipelagos, the Lakshadweep, coral atolls off India's southwestern coast, and the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, a volcanic chain in the Andaman Sea. 178, the Indian climate is strongly influenced by the Himalayas and the Thar Desert, both of which drive the economically and culturally pivotal summer and winter monsoons. 179, the Himalayas prevent cold Central Asian katabatic winds from blowing in, keeping the bulk of the Indian subcontinent warmer than most locations at similar latitudes. 180, 181, the Thar Desert plays a crucial role in attracting the moisture-laden southwest summer monsoon winds that, between June and October, provide the majority of India's rainfall. 179, four major climatic groupings predominate in India: tropical wet, tropical dry, subtropical humid, and montane. 182, biodiversity. World's most populous democracy. 208, a parliamentary republic with a multi-party system. 209, it has 8 recognized national parties, including the Indian National Congress and the Bharatiya Janata Party (BJP), and more than 40 regional parties. 210, The Congress is considered centre-left in Indian political culture, 211, and the BJP right-wing, 212, 213, 214, for most of the period between 1950, when India first became a republic, and the late 1980s. The Congress held a majority in the parliament. Since then, however, it has increasingly shared the political stage with the BJP, 215, as well as with powerful regional parties which have often forced the creation of multi-party coalition governments at the centre. 216, in the Republic of India's first three general elections. In 1951, 1957, and 1962, the Jawaharlal Nehru-led Congress won easy victories. On Nehru's death in 1964, Lal Bahadur Shastri briefly became Prime Minister. He was succeeded, after his own unexpected death in 1966, by Nehru's daughter Indira Gandhi, who went on to lead the Congress to election victories in 1967 and 1971. Following public discontent with the state of emergency she declared in 1975, the Congress was voted out of power in 1977. The then new Janata Party, which had voted in, its government lasted just over 2 years. Voted back into power in 1980, the Congress saw a change in leadership in 1984, when Indira Gandhi was assassinated. She was succeeded by her son Rajiv Gandhi, who won an easy victory in the general elections later that year. The Congress was voted out again in 1989 when a National Front coalition, led by the newly formed Janata Dal in alliance with the Left Front, won the elections. That government too proved relatively short-lived, lasting just under 2 years. 217 elections were held again in 1991. No party won an absolute majority. The Congress, as the largest single party, was able to form a minority government led by P.V. Narasimha Rao. 218. A 2-year period of political turmoil followed the general election of 1996. Several short-lived alliances shared power at the center. The BJP formed a government briefly in 1996. It was followed by 2 comparatively long-lasting United Front coalitions, which depended on external support. In 1998, the BJP was able to form a successful coalition, the National Democratic Alliance, NDA. Led by Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the NDA became the first non-Congress coalition government to complete a 5-year term. 219. Again in the 2004 Indian general elections, no party won an absolute majority, but the Congress emerged as the largest single party, forming another successful coalition, the United Progressive Alliance (UPA). It had the support of left-leaning parties and MPs who opposed the BJP. The UPA returned to power in the 2009 general election with increased numbers, and it no longer required external support from India's communist parties. 220, that year. Manmohan Singh became the first Prime Minister since Jawaharlal Nehru in 1957 and 1962 to be re-elected to a consecutive 5-year term. 221, in the 2014 general election. The BJP became the first political party since 1984 to win a majority and govern without the support of other parties. 222, the incumbent Prime Minister is Narendra Modi, a former Chief Minister of Gujarat. On 20 July 2017, Ram Nath Kovind was elected India's 14th President and took the oath of office on 25 July 2017. India is a federation with a parliamentary system governed under the Constitution of India, the country's supreme legal document. It is a constitutional republic and representative democracy, in which majority rule is tempered by minority rights protected by law. Federalism in India defines the power distribution between the Union and the states. The Constitution of India, which came into effect on 26 January 1950, 227, originally stated India to be a «sovereign, democratic republic». This characterization was amended in 1971 to a «sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic» 228, India's form of government. Traditionally described as quasi-federal, with a strong center and weak states, 229, has grown increasingly federal since the late 1990s as a result of political, economic, and social changes. 230, 231, national symbols, 1. Flag Tiranga, tricolor, emblem Sarnath lion, capital anthem Jana Gana Mana song, Vande Mataram, language Nun, 8, 9, 10, currency rupee, Indian rupee. Calendar Saka animal Bengal tiger river dolphin Indian peafowl flower lotus fruit mango tree banyan river Ganges game not declared. 232, the Government of India comprises 3 branches. In the 1950s, India strongly supported decolonization in Africa and Asia and played a leading role in the non-aligned movement. 253, after initially cordial relations with neighboring China. India went to war with China in 1962, and was widely thought to have been humiliated. India has had tense relations with neighboring Pakistan. The two nations have gone to war 4 times, in 1947, 1965, 1971, and 1999. 3 of these wars were fought over the disputed territory of Kashmir, while the 4th, the 1971 war, followed from India's support for the independence of Bangladesh. 254. In the late 1980s, the Indian military twice intervened abroad at the invitation of the host country. A peacekeeping operation in Sri Lanka between 1987 and 1990, and an armed intervention to prevent a 1988 coup d'état attempt in the Maldives. After the 1965 war with Pakistan, India began to pursue close military and economic ties with the Soviet Union. By the late 1960s, the Soviet Union was its largest arms supplier. 255, aside from ongoing its special relationship with Russia. 256, India has wide-ranging defense relations with Israel and France. In recent years, it has played key roles in the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation and the World Trade Organization. The nation has provided 100,000 military and police personnel to serve in 35 UN peacekeeping operations across 4 continents. It participates in the East Asia Summit, the G8-5, and other multilateral forums. 257, India has close economic ties with countries in South America. 258, Asia, and Africa. It pursues a «Look East» policy that seeks to strengthen partnerships with the ASEAN nations, Japan, and South Korea that revolve around many issues, but especially those involving economic investment and regional security. China's nuclear test of 1964, as well as its repeated threats to intervene in support of Pakistan in the 1965 war, convinced India to develop nuclear weapons. 262, India conducted its first nuclear weapons test in 1974 and carried out additional underground testing in 1998. Despite criticism and military sanctions, India has signed neither the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty nor the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Considering both to be flawed and discriminatory. 263. India maintains a no first-use nuclear policy and is developing a nuclear triad capability as a part of its minimum credible deterrence doctrine. 264, 265. It is developing a ballistic missile defense shield and a fifth-generation fighter jet. 266, 267. Other indigenous military projects involve the design and implementation of Vikrant-class aircraft carriers and Arihant-class nuclear submarines. 268. Since the end of the Cold War, India has increased its economic, strategic, and military cooperation with the United States and the European Union. 269. In 2008. A civilian nuclear agreement was signed between India and the United States. Although India possessed nuclear weapons at the time and was not a party to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, it received waivers from the International Atomic Energy Agency and the Nuclear Suppliers Group, ending earlier restrictions on India's nuclear technology and commerce. As a consequence, India became the sixth de facto nuclear weapons state. 270. India subsequently signed cooperation agreements involving civilian nuclear energy with Russia. 271. France. 272. The United Kingdom. 273. And Canada. Main article: Culture of India. A Sikh pilgrim at the Harmandir Sahib, or Golden Temple, in Amritsar, Punjab. Indian cultural history spans more than 4,500 years, 355, during the Vedic period, c. 1700 BCE, c. 500 BCE. The foundations of Hindu philosophy, mythology, theology and literature were laid, and many beliefs and practices which still exist today, such as Dharma, Karma, Yoga, and Moksha, were established. 63. India is notable for its religious diversity, with Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Islam, Christianity, and Jainism among the nation's major religions. 356. The predominant religion, Hinduism, has been shaped by various historical schools of thought, including those of the Upanishads. 357. The Yoga Sutras, the Bhakti movement. 356, and by Buddhist philosophy. 358. This South Asia has an ancient tradition of art, which has exchanged influences with the parts of Eurasia. Seals from the 3rd millennium BCE Indus Valley civilization of Pakistan and northern India have been found, usually carved with animals, but a few with human figures. The Pashupati seal, excavated in Mohenjo-Daro, Pakistan, in 1928-29. is the best known. 359. After this there is a long period with virtually nothing surviving. 360. Almost all surviving ancient Indian art thereafter is in various forms of religious sculpture in durable materials or coins. There was probably originally far more in wood, which is lost. In North India, Mauryan art is the first imperial movement. 361, in the 1st millennium CE. Buddhist art spread with Indian religions to Central, East and Southeast Asia. The last also greatly influenced by Hindu art. 362, over the following centuries a distinctly Indian style of sculpting the human figure developed. with less interest in articulating precise anatomy than ancient Greek sculpture but showing smoothly flowing forms expressing prana, breath, or life force. 363. This is often complicated by the need to give figures multiple arms or heads, or represent different genders on the left and right of figures, as with the Ardhanarishvara form of Shiva and Parvati. Most of the earliest large sculpture is Buddhist, either excavated from Buddhist stupas such as Sanchi, Sarnath and Amaravati, 365, or is rock-cut reliefs at sites such as Ajanta, Kala and Ellora. Hindu and Jain sites appear rather later, 366, in spite of this complex mixture of religious traditions. Generally, the prevailing artistic style at any time and place has been shared by the major religious groups, and sculptors probably usually served all communities. 367, Gupta art. At its peak between about 300 CE and 500 CE, is often regarded as a classical period whose influence lingered for many centuries after. It saw a new dominance of Hindu sculpture. As at the Elephanta Caves, 368, across the north, this became rather stiff and formulaic after about 800 CE, though rich with finely carved detail in the surrounds of statues. 369. But in the south, under the Pallava and Chola dynasties, sculpture in both stone and bronze had a sustained period of great achievement. The large bronzes with Shiva as Nataraja have become an iconic symbol of India. 370. Ancient painting has only survived at a few sites, of which the crowded scenes of court life in the Ajanta caves are by far the most important, but it was evidently highly developed, and is mentioned as a courtly accomplishment in Gupta times. 371. Painted manuscripts of religious texts survive from eastern India about the 10th century onwards, most of the earliest being Buddhist and later Jain. No doubt the style of these was used in larger paintings. 372. The Persian-derived Deccan painting, starting just before the Mughal miniature. Between them give the first large body of secular painting, with an emphasis on portraits, and the recording of princely pleasures and wars. 373. The style spread to Hindu courts, especially among the Rajputs, and developed a variety of styles, with the smaller courts often the most innovative, with figures such as Nihal Chand and Nansuk. 374. As a market developed among European residents, it was supplied by company painting by Indian artists with considerable Western influence. 375. In the 19th century, cheap Kaligat paintings of gods and everyday life, done on paper, were urban folk art from Calcutta, which later saw the Bengal School of Art, reflecting the art colleges founded by the British, the first movement in modern Indian painting. Much of Indian architecture, including the Taj Mahal, other works of Mughal architecture, and South Indian architecture, blends ancient local traditions with imported styles. 377. Vernacular architecture is also regional in its flavors. Vastu Shastra, literally, science of construction, or architecture, and ascribed to Mamuni Mayan, 378, explores how the laws of nature affect human dwellings. 379. It employs precise geometry and directional alignments to reflect perceived cosmic constructs. 380. As applied in Hindu temple architecture, it is influenced by the Shilpa Shastras, a series of foundational texts whose basic mythological form is the Vastu Purusha Mandala, a square that embodied the absolute. 381. The Taj Mahal, built in Agra between 1631 and 1648 by orders of Emperor Shah Jahan in memory of his wife. Has been described in the UNESCO World Heritage List as the jewel of Muslim art in India and one of the universally admired masterpieces of the world's heritage. 382. Indo-Saracenic Revival. Architecture. Developed by the British in the late 19th century, drew on Indo-Islamic architecture. 383. The earliest literature in India, composed between 1500 BCE and 1200 CE, was in the Sanskrit language. 384. Major works of Sanskrit literature include the Rig Veda, c. 1500 BCE, c. 1200 BCE, the epics, Mahabharata, c. 400 BCE, c. 400 CE, and the Ramayana, c. 300 BCE and later. Abhinanasakuntalam, the recognition of Sakuntala, and other dramas of Kalidasa, c. 5th century CE, and Mahakavya poetry. 385, 386, 387, in Tamil literature. The Sangam literature, c. 600 BCE, c. 300 BCE, consisting of 2,381 poems, composed by 473 poets, is the earliest work. 388, 389, 390, 391, from the 14th to the 18th centuries. India's literary traditions went through a period of drastic change because of the emergence. Indian music ranges over various traditions and regional styles. Classical music encompasses two genres and their various folk offshoots. The northern Hindustani and southern Carnatic schools. 394. Regionalized popular forms include filmy and folk music. The syncretic tradition of the Bauls is a well-known form of the latter. Indian dance also features diverse folk and classical forms. Among the better-known folk dances are the Bhangra of Punjab, the Bihu of Assam, the Jhumar and Chau of Jharkhand, Odisha and West Bengal, Garba and Dandiya of Gujarat, Ghumar of Rajasthan, and the Lavani of Maharashtra. 8 dance forms, many with narrative forms and mythological elements, have been accorded classical dance status by India's National Academy of Music, Dance, and Drama. These are Bharatanatyam of the state of Tamil Nadu, Kathak of Uttar Pradesh, Kathakali and Mohiniyattam of Kerala, Kuchipudi of Andhra Pradesh, Manipuri of Manipur, Odissi of Odisha, and the Satriya of Assam. Traditional Indian society is sometimes defined by social hierarchy. The Indian caste system embodies much of the social stratification and many of the social restrictions found in the Indian subcontinent. Social classes are defined by thousands of endogamous hereditary groups, often termed as jatis, or castes. 406. India declared untouchability to be illegal. 407, in 1947 and has since enacted other anti-discriminatory laws and social welfare initiatives. Family values are important in the Indian tradition, and multi-generational patriarchal joint families have been the norm in India. Though nuclear families are becoming common in urban areas. 408, an overwhelming majority of Indians, with their consent, have their marriages arranged by their parents or other family elders. 409. Marriage is thought to be for life. 409. And the divorce rate is extremely low. 410, with less than 1 in 1,000 marriages ending in divorce. 411. Child marriages are common, especially in rural areas. Many women wed before reaching 18, which is their legal marriageable age. 412. Female infanticide in India, and lately female feticide, have created skewed gender ratios. The number of missing women in the country quadrupled from 15 million to 63 million in the 50-year period ending in 2014, faster than the population growth during the same period, and constituting 20% of India's female electorate. 413. According to an Indian government study, an additional 21 million girls are unwanted and do not receive adequate care. The most widely worn traditional dress in India, for both women and men, from ancient times until the advent of modern times, was draped. 428. For women it eventually took the form of a sari. A single long piece of cloth, famously 6 yards long, and of width spanning the lower body. 428. The sari is tied around the waist and knotted at one end, wrapped around the lower body, and then over the shoulder. 428. In its more modern form, it has been used to cover the head, and sometimes the face, as a veil. 428. It has been combined with an underskirt, or Indian petticoat, and tucked in the waistband for more secure fastening. It is also commonly worn with an Indian blouse, or choli, which serves as the primary upper body garment. The sari's end, passing over the shoulder, serving to obscure the upper body's contours and to cover the midriff. 428. For men, a similar but shorter length of cloth, the dhoti, has served as a lower body garment. 429. It too is tied around the waist and wrapped. 429. In South India, it is usually wrapped around the lower bow. In addition, in northern India, it is also wrapped once around each leg before being brought up through the legs to be tucked in at the back. Other forms of traditional apparel that involve no stitching or tailoring are the chadar, a shawl worn by both sexes to cover the upper body during colder weather, or a large veil worn by women for framing the head, or covering it, and the pagri, a turban or a scarf worn around the head as a part of a tradition, or to keep off the sun or the cold. 429. From top left to bottom right, O. Women, from L to R, churidars and kameez, with back to the camera, in jeans and sweater, in pink shalwar kameez shopping. B. Girls in the Kashmir region in embroidered hijab. C. A tailor in pagri and kameez working outside a fabric shop until the beginning of the first millennium CE. The ordinary dress of people in India was entirely unstitched. 430. The arrival of the cushions from Central Asia, c. 48 CE, popularized cut and sewn garments in the style of Central Asian favored by the elite in northern India. 430. However, it was not until Muslim rule was established, first with the Delhi Sultanate and then the Mughal Empire, that the range of stitched clothes in India grew and their use became significantly more widespread. 430. Among the various garments gradually establishing themselves in northern India during medieval and early modern times and now commonly worn are the shalwars and pajamas, both forms of trousers, as well as the tunics kurta and kameez. 430. In southern India, however, the traditional draped garments were to see much longer continuous use at the waist but narrow to a cuffed bottom. They are held up by a drawstring or elastic belt, which causes them to become pleated around the waist. 431. The pants can be wide and baggy, or they can be cut quite narrow, on the bias, in which case they are called churidars. The kameez is a long shirt or tunic. 432. The side seams are left open below the waistline. 433, which gives the wearer greater freedom of movement. The kameez is usually cut straight and flat. Older kameez use traditional cuts. Modern kameez are more likely to have European-inspired set-in sleeves. The kameez may have a European-style collar, a Mandarin collar, or it may be collarless. In the latter case, its design as a women's garment is similar to a kurta. 434. At first worn by Muslim women, the use of shalwar kameez gradually spread, making them a regional style. 435, 436, especially in the Punjab region. 437, 438, a kurta, which traces its roots to Central Asian nomadic tunics, has evolved stylistically in India as a garment for everyday wear as well as for formal occasions. 430, it is traditionally made of cotton or silk. It is worn plain or with embroidered decoration, such as chikan, and it can be loose or tight in the torso, typically falling either just above or somewhere below the wearer's knees. 439. The sleeves of a traditional kurta fall to the wrist without narrowing, the ends hemmed but not cuffed. The kurta can be worn by both men and women. It is traditionally collarless, though standing collars are increasingly popular, and it can be worn over ordinary pajamas, loose shalwars, churidars, or less traditionally over jeans. 439. In the last 50 years, India, the sari is no longer the apparel of everyday wear, transformed instead into one for formal occasions. 440. The traditional shalwar kameez is rarely worn by younger women, who favor churidars or jeans. 440. The kurtas worn by young men usually fall to the shins and are seldom plain. In white-collar office settings, ubiquitous air conditioning allows men to wear sports jackets year-round. 440. For weddings and formal occasions, men in the middle and upper classes often wear bandgala, or short Nehru jackets, with pants, with the groom and his groomsmen sporting sherwanis and churidars. 440. The dhoti, the once universal garment of Hindu India, the wearing of which in the homespun and handwoven form of khadi allowed Gandhi to bring Indian nationalism to the millions. 441. Is seldom seen in the cities. 440. Reduced now, with brocaded border, to the liturgical vestments of Hindu priests. Indian cuisine consists of a wide variety of regional and traditional cuisines. Given the range of diversity in soil type, climate, culture, ethnic groups, and occupations, these cuisines vary substantially from each other, using locally available spices, herbs, vegetables, and fruit. Indian foodways have been influenced by religion, in particular Hindu cultural choices and traditions. 442. They have been also shaped by Islamic rule, particularly that of the Mughals, by the arrival of the Portuguese on India's southwestern shores, and by British rule. These three influences are reflected, respectively, in the dishes of pilaf and biryani, the vindaloo, and the tiffin and the railway mutton curry. 443. Earlier, the Columbian exchange had brought the potato, the tomato, maize, peanuts, cashew nuts, pineapples, guavas, and most notably, chili peppers, to India. Each became staples of use. 4. The cereals grown in India, their choice, times, and regions of planting, correspond strongly to the timing of India's monsoons, and the variation across regions in their associated rainfall. 446. In general, the broad division of cereal zones in India, as determined by their dependence on rain, was firmly in place before the arrival of artificial irrigation. 446. Rice, which requires a lot of water, has been grown traditionally in regions of high rainfall in the northeast and the western coast, wheat in regions of moderate rainfall, like India's northern plains, and millet in regions of low rainfall, such as on the Deccan Plateau and in Rajasthan. 447. 446. The foundation of a typical Indian meal is a cereal cooked in plain fashion and complemented with flavorful savory dishes. 448. The latter includes lentils, pulses and vegetables spiced commonly with ginger and garlic, but also more discerningly with a combination of spices that may include coriander, cumin, turmeric, cinnamon, cardamom and others is informed by culinary conventions. 448. In an actual meal, this mental representation takes the form of a platter, or thali, with a central place for the cooked cereal, peripheral ones, often in small bowls, for the flavorful accompaniments, and the simultaneous, rather than piecemeal, ingestion of the two in each act of eating, whether by actual mixing, for example of rice and Amiri roti, a Muslim-influenced style of leavened bread. 449. A notable feature of Indian food is the existence of a number of distinctive vegetarian cuisines, each a feature of the geographical and cultural histories of its adherents. 450. The appearance of ahimsa, or the avoidance of violence toward all forms of life in many religious orders early in Indian history, especially Upanishadic Hinduism, Buddhism and Jainism, is thought to have been a notable factor in the prevalence of vegetarianism among a segment of India's Hindu population, especially in southern India, Gujarat, and the Hindi-speaking belt of north-central India, as well as among Jains. 450. Among these groups, strong discomfort is felt at thoughts of eating meat. 451. And contributes to the low proportional consumption of meat to overall diet in India. 451. Unlike China, which has increased its per capita meat consumption substantially in its years of increased economic growth, in India the strong dietary traditions have contributed to dairy, rather than meat, becoming the preferred form of animal protein consumption accompanying higher economic growth. 452. In the last millennium, the most significant import of cooking techniques into India occurred during the Mughal Empire. The cultivation of rice had spread much earlier from India to Central and West Asia. However, it was during Mughal rule that dishes, such as the pilaf, 447, developed in the interim during the Abbasid Caliphate, 453, and cooking techniques such as the marinating of meat in yogurt spread into northern India from regions to its northwest. 454. To the simple yogurt marinade of Persia, onions, garlic, almonds, and spices began to be added in India. 454. Rice grown to the southwest of the Mughal capital, Agra, which had become famous in the Islamic world for its fine grain, was partially cooked and layered alternately with the sautéed meat, the pot sealed tightly, and slow cooked according to another Persian cooking technique, to produce what has today become the Indian biryani. 454. A feature of festive dining in many parts of India. 455. In food served in restaurants in urban North India, and internationally. The diversity of Indian food has been partially concealed by the dominance of Punjabi cuisine. This was caused in large part by an entrepreneurial response among people from the Punjab region who had been displaced by the 1947 partition of India, and had arrived in India as refugees. 450. the identification of Indian cuisine with the tandoori chicken, cooked in the tandoor oven, which had traditionally been used for baking bread in the rural Punjab and the Delhi region, especially among Muslims, but which is originally from Central Asia, dates to this period. 450. Sports and Cricket is the most popular sport in India. 456. Major domestic competitions include the Indian Premier League, which is the most watched cricket league in the world and ranks 6th among all sports leagues. 457. Several traditional indigenous sports remain fairly popular, such as kabaddi, kho-kho, Pelwani and Gilli Danda. Some of the earliest forms of Asian martial arts, such as Kalaripayattu, Musti Yuddha, Salambam, and Marmaradi, originated in India. Chess, commonly held to have originated in India as Chaturanga, is regaining widespread popularity with the rise in the number of Indian grandmasters. 458. 459. Pachisi, from which Parcheesi derives, was played on a giant marble court by Akbar. 460. The improved results garnered by the Indian Davis Cup team and other Indian tennis players in the early 2010s have made tennis increasingly popular in the country. 461. India has a comparatively strong presence in shooting sports, and has won several medals at the Olympics, the World Shooting Championships, and the Commonwealth Games. 462. 463. Other sports in which Indians have succeeded internationally include badminton. 464. Saina Nehwal and PV Sindhu are two of the top-ranked female badminton players in the world. Boxing. 465. And wrestling. 466. Football is popular in West Bengal, Goa, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and the northeastern states. 467. Girls play hopscotch in Jayora, Madhya Pradesh. Hopscotch has been commonly played by girls in rural India. 468. India has hosted or co-hosted several international sporting events, the 1951 and 1982 Asian Games, the 1987, 1996, and 2011 Cricket World Cup tournaments, the 2003 Afro-Asian Games, the 2006 ICC Champions Trophy, the 2010 Hockey World Cup, the 2010 Commonwealth Games, and the 2017 FIFA U17 World Cup. Major international sporting events held annually in India include the Chennai Open, the Mumbai Marathon, the Delhi Half Marathon, and the Indian Masters. The first Formula One Indian Grand Prix featured in late 2011 but has been discontinued from the F1 season calendar since 2014. 469. India has traditionally been the dominant country at the South Asian Games. An example of this dominance is the basketball competition where the Indian team won 3 out of 4 tournaments to date. 470. See also